My name is Charles Green. I'm going to be talking to you with my presentation on the history, geography, and maps of Middle-earth. I want to first talk about the importance of fantasy and the maps within. First of all, I want to start with an apology. Tolkien is smarter than me, and there may be mispronunciations on words and things like that. I'm still trying to piece it all together. I've only read The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and parts of the Atlas of Middle-earth. I've failed reading the Silmarillion multiple times. I'm still piecing it all together and trying to get it to work. So I am not an expert. I'm trying to become one, and I'm doing something for the community and trying to learn with you. So if you know more than me, please don't blurt it out. But I mean, I'm happy to talk with anyone afterwards on things that I do not know, because the world that he has created is so dense and so big that no person could possibly read it and absorb it all within the first time. It's so big and so dense, it needs to be studied like history. It's ridiculous to that extent. So I really feel there should be no judgment in the community of where you are, how much time you put into it. If you want to learn, there should be acceptance, no matter if you appreciate the movies, have read the books, trying to get into it. We should all be more accepting of where people are with the story, because it's 1,200 pages, it's huge, it's daunting, and then there's more to it too. So, but everyone should have read The Hobbit. I think we can all agree with that. There's two kinds of thinking when it comes to fantasy, it's either, for some people it's easy to get into, and for some people it's not. And I've learned that there's basically two camps with that. And I hope to argue to those people maybe who aren't into that. I mean, if you're here, maybe you're probably on one side of the camp, but I hope to be uploading this to YouTube and sharing it with other people, and I want to argue why I think it is important if you don't feel so. I want to start with the quote of the idea that history becomes legend, legend becomes myth, a great quote at the start of the movies, right? And the idea that as time goes on, or generations pass, things get lost between people. And like I said, if it's stories and ideas that are passed through generation, that's even worse. We've all played telephone when we were in kindergarten to second grade, right? That that last message never ends up being what the first message is. It always gets changed, and that's amplified through generations. But I would argue that there's still some truth to creation stories, and that it's just human beings before pre-science trying to make sense of the world. It gives insight to our fears, our ambitions, our hopes, our desires, things of that sort. And we have science now, but there still is the world of the unknown. There's still branches of science, physics, things that we don't know and don't comprehend. So I would argue to an extent we're still not fully there. So it's interesting to understand human beings at that level. Also, pointing out that language affects your perception of the world. I want to highlight that it is the lens that through which you view the world, or the foundation of the building on which you build your understanding of the world. Translations are flawed. There's a famous example of Sir Richard Burton on his travels through Africa, that he came across a tribe, and that he told them that he was going to try to do something, and the tribe people, his translator told him, well, there's no word for try. Linked to Star Wars, right? There's no try, only do, right? Mm-hmm. But as Charles V, King of England, King of France, once said, I speak Spanish to God, Italian to women, French to men, and German to my horse. Just highlighting how different languages have different emphases on certain things. Pointing out too, which way is north? Asking you all, which direction is north? As far as I know, it's that way. So, yeah, as far as I know, it's that way because the North Bridge, right? 35 goes north, right?
It's this way.
east and west.
It's this way.
Here, yeah.
The river runs north.
Or where? Okay, where?
Yeah.
Yeah, the river runs north, and the river's over here, right?
Yep.
Right.
Yep, and it runs this way.
Runs. Okay. So yes. Okay. So we. But yeah, just saying though, if we had a 5-year-old Aboriginal child in this room, he would have immediately been able to tell you which way is north, because in their language, everything that they talk about is based in context to their cardinal direction. Imagine how that gives you, like I said, just interesting how we all just had an argument about which way is north. I've been in a room full of geographers who I asked them that question, and then it turns into a giant argument. And it's like, we're professional geographers. We should know this. But like I said, to a 5-year-old Aboriginal child, because of their language structure, they understand more about geography than some professional geographers. It's just interesting. My theory personally is that English is the most oppressive language in that it has more layers of class and hegemony than any other language that I am aware of. Classism is basically built into the language, and this is simply because of the Norman invasion. If you're unaware, basically the French came over, loaded up the boats with horses, and trampled the English people. They destroyed lots of their culture, stories. I mean, there was just a huge destruction of the culture and heritage of the English people. And French, basically it created a whole influx of new words to the English language that were basically used just solely by the French noblemen. If you're questioning this idea, think of the idea, do you think people that use bigger words are smarter? If you think about it, it kind of is something that we inherently think is true, and this comes down to that French words are generally longer than their English counterparts. And that this, like I said, so if you're a French nobleman using big words, you're smarter, and all that. I can even prove it in the idea that courts still use two terms for any trial that they have coming up: breaking and entering. It goes back to the days of these courts where they would have a word for the French nobleman to understand and a word for the English peasants to understand. Now, even highlighting this even more, that there's the Himba people of Nambia in Africa. They only have 5 basic color terms. We, as color complex languages, usually have up to 11. 3 primary colors, 3 secondary colors, and 4 neutral colors. Pink is the only color outside of those that we recognize, and that's kind of an interesting thing. All cultures have a word for black or white, and in this, an anthropologist did a thought experiment, or well, not a thought experiment, but an experiment here, where if you see this color wheel here, this green is actually slightly different than the rest of these greens. When he put it in front of the Himba people, they would see this green immediately. They would have pointed out, oh, that green's different. And I think that comes down to the idea that they have 2 different greens in their language, arguably for plant identification and survival. But then he would put this wheel in front of them with this light blue. And as you can see, their blues and greens blend together. He'd put this in front of them, and they wouldn't be able to see that blue dot. They would look at it for minutes and just give up because they couldn't tell the difference between this blue and the rest of these greens, where they could tell the difference between this green and the rest of these greens. So I just find that fascinating. And I want to highlight too that pink realistically is just red. For some reason, we identify it as a solely different color where, we could do the same with red, orange, or, whatever we decided. Highlighting too that in Russian, they separate their blues. Their dark blues and their light blues. And to me, that makes more sense, right? Why is the deep blue ocean blue different than sky blue, right? So I'd actually argue we should think more about maybe changing the way we think about our blues. But Also came across this and I thought it was just interesting. I don't know how much truth there is to it, but just the idea that men and women see color kind of differently. Maybe it's just in their classification that maybe, I don't want to speculate, but I just found that interesting that maybe there's a difference in just the way that you classify colors and the way that your perception of the world. So my studies in anthropology have led me to believe that it's unwise to try to understand stories from an outside perspective. Tolkien's writings are an amalgamation of beliefs and ideologies pulled from languages across cultures, and in my opinion, a linguist who is deeply knowledgeable on so many language and the intricacies of those, and all the other reasons I've just highlighted in the last few segments, could be qualified for such a project. And that's why I think it is still to this day why his work is relevant. And I want to also highlight too that considering that all that I've pointed out, that things are embedded in language, that when language dies, it is the loss of culture. It's truly a sad thing. So, but let's be realistic. The Tolkien and some of the reasons he was doing his writing was it is a form of escapism. For a war veteran, a lot of people speculated that he wrote these as a way to kind of escape the horrors that he lived through and was still dealing with. But I also want to point out that maps are a portal into a fantasy world. And also the idea, I came across this quote from George R.R. Martin, that a reader lives 1,000 lives before they die. The person who never reads lives only one. And pointing out too that my family quotes Lord of the Rings more than any religious text. And some people, that might be, but it's, I'm not a big church-going person. My family's not, and no judgment, for anybody who is, but I just haven't found what I wanted there. And to me, it's growing up as a Christian, he embodies a lot of these values and a lot of those things, and amongst other things that are pulled in there. And I'm a pull and piece things together from all sorts of ideas and places. So I appreciate that it's been kind of a good replacement for a more moral replacement in the absence of having a devout religion that I am, or a religion that I am devout to. So I want to talk about the Peter Jackson films here for a little bit, just because they are, obviously I love the books and I'm hoping that many people have read it, but obviously I do understand that they are what has brought a lot of people into this world, and you have to appreciate that for what it is. They're overall successful critically and financially, and by far the best adaptation we've gotten so far. I have complicated feelings about it because I was the target audience, and keep in mind that phrase, the target audience, that'll come into play later. But I may have never gotten into the world without it. The Lord of the Rings is 1,200 pages, it's daunting. It's, like I said, I don't think I would have been able to absorb it all without it as a base as a guide to helping me read the books. Me and my family, we saw it every Christmas while I was in high school, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. And now it's a tradition on Christmas that we just put on the movies and we all do other things. And, obviously we're in and out of it, but they're just on in the background, and we all know so much about it that we just appreciate it. But I did realize after reading the books that they're not perfect. Keep in mind though, I can Mystery Science Theater 3000 any movie, even good ones. So I'm overcritical and I don't recommend watching movies with me. So keep that in mind. I'm, like I said, overly critical. So I don't want to take away anyone's appreciation for anything. They are great. They're objectively good films, but they have the unfortunate disadvantage of being compared to the books. And the films did a lot right. And it's amazing to see some of the best moments in literature come to life when they are done well. But they also made some decisions that are just baffling to anyone who is a fan of the literature, such as the exclusion of Elladan and Elrohir, as well as Glorfindel. I mean, he killed the Balrog. Why wouldn't we want to meet that guy? I would also consider myself very forgiving, but I cannot forgive Peter Jackson for what he did to Faramir. Also, the scouring of the Shire. Me personally, I feel like the best thing that they could have done at the Return of the King is end it after the wedding and just say goodbye to them on their road and leave for a fourth film to be played out. You would need a much smaller portion of the cast to do the scouring of the Shire, and would have filled that desire people had for Lord of the Rings after, and also give you more room to work with other things. And also the biggest complaint I know most people have about Return of the King is it feels like it has 3 endings or even more endings. So that could have circumvented that complaint I know a lot of people have about it. But I'm happy, I could obviously go on more, but I'm happy to discuss after the presentation more about the movies and things like that. But let's continue. I did want to share one of my absolute favorite quotes from the book because I'm just baffled that it's not in the movies. War must be, while we defend our lives against a destroyer who would devour all. But I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only which they defend. I love only that which they defend. Sorry, I'm screwing it up already. All right, but then also talk about the Hobbit movies a little bit. Originally supposed to be 2 movies done by Guillermo del Toro. He left the project, and basically Peter Jackson was blackmailed into doing the movies because if he wouldn't do them, the studio was going to move them out of New Zealand. So he basically took the job to keep all the jobs in New Zealand. But I still do not understand why he made all the movies 3 hours apiece. It takes only 5.5 to 6 hours to read The Hobbit, yet it takes over 9 hours to finish the movies. That's just wrong. To quote Thorin Oakenshield, if more of us valued food and cheer above song and hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. And the irony is not lost on me that the producers broke the story into 3 parts to give us a ham-fisted love story between an elf and a dwarf, as well as a barrel scene that is genuinely painful to watch. So, as you can see, I can Lord of the Rings I can be okay with, but yeah, I cannot give the pass on that. I do remember seeing the Tolkien movie years back. I don't remember a whole lot about it, so I just want to point out that it is out there. I just remember thinking that I don't think Tolkien would like parts of it, so I just wanted to highlight that it's there if you're interested. I don't know, I guess I should probably do more research to find out how good it actually is, but I just remembered, I remembered it being kind of forgettable. Also highlight, if you haven't heard, this December comes out the War of the Rohirrim. It's actually a Japanese anime style, which I don't know how I feel about that. I just am so used to Japanese stories intertwined with the Japanese anime that I personally would have preferred a Sleeping Beauty or a medieval style of animation, as I think it would have fit Tolkien's world a little better, but and I'll also discuss a few of the fandom and adaptations. I personally think it's important to discuss where it's at and where it's going, because we ultimately, as the fans, do get to decide what we accept and what we think is good and how things are going to proceed forward. Because the truth is, they're going to continue to make more. Most adaptations have been, putting it kindly, not the greatest. Animated movies, TV, theater. And saying that, I've had some pushback. Some people do like The Hobbit, and especially Gollum. I've heard a lot of putback that Gollum still, from the animated movies, still scares them. So, like I said, got some pushback on that, so I wanted to highlight that for the people who did talk to me afterwards. So the movie rights, I just want to point out that the movie rights are owned by a different group than the literature. And that's why you get such a discrepancy between what comes out in the literature world from Tolkien and the movie world. The movie rights were almost bought by the Beatles, so I just thought that's a fun little fact, but Tolkien ultimately turned that down. Personally, I got to the title screen of Rings of Power before I rage quit. And from what I hear, it's an atrocity. Just because you throw money at it doesn't make it Middle Earth. And more research is needed, but Jeff Bezos might be a ring ray. I'm not sure. More research is needed. There's so much good in Tolkien's original work that you really don't need to stray far from the source material. I understand if you may need to adapt to a movie, but you don't need to change the structure of what's going on. And personally, I think it's disrespectful to his name, legacy, and memory. But it's a good thing I came here to discuss the books. But I did want to highlight this as I was doing more research. I found out that this is coming out next year in 2026. But point out kind of that Lord of the Rings fans are actually kind of in the same bind that Star Wars fans are. We got an amazing trilogy, then we got a terrible trilogy, then there's a whole bunch of crap in between, and now it went from please give us more to please don't give us any more. So I just like to point out, I kind of feel like it used to be kind of Lord of the Rings versus Star Wars, but I kind of feel like we should come together as fans and kind of realize we're in the same struggle. But it's hard to talk about, get more into the works of Tolkien. It's hard to discuss Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth without talking about John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. He was born in South Africa in 1892, and he died in 1973. His father died of typhoid fever when he was 4 years old during a vacation to England with his mother. Then his mother died of diabetes when he was 12. The unfortunate thing is if she had been born in more modern times, it would have been completely curable. Obviously back then you couldn't take insulin shots and things like that, so she unfortunately died from something that even in his lifetime would eventually become curable. His mother influenced his love of language, stories, fairy tales, and mythology, and he had a great love of nature in the English countryside. He had a very green worldview before that was kind of a thing, and actually kind of became latched on by the counterculture hippie movement of the 1960s for maybe that reason. He was very heavily influenced by the stories of the Kalevala, which the Kalevala is a 19th century compilation of epic poetry and ballads from the Karelane and the Finnish folklore. Continuing theme seems to be that of self-sacrifice for the betterment of their people. The leader of the Sons of Kalevala is a wise old man named Vanamonian. I probably butchered that. But a powerful seer with supernatural origins, which obviously Gandalf parallels in Tolkien's stories. Tolkien was a World War II veteran, and in the Battle of the Somme. The Battle of the Somme was the first battle with tanks, and he was not on the side with the tanks. So I imagine
World War I?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Yes. My deepest apologies. Yes. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Yes. World War I. That is definitely a mistake. My apologies. Yes. But yes, the World War I. And in the Battle of the Somme, as you can see, I'm not a complete expert on everything, and I'm still learning things. But no, that's just I don't know why I put World War II on there. But yeah, the Battle of the Somme was the first battle with tanks. Like I said, he was not on the side with the tanks. So imagine that he was actually even a member of the cavalry. The idea that he could have been lining up on for the cavalry and seeing tanks come over the hill. Tolkien was a linguist, a philologist, and a polyglot, meaning he spoke multiple languages. He constructed his first language as a teenager, and he knew 35 different tongues, ancient and modern. He taught himself Finnish just for fun. I guess he was traveling home one day and just saw these Finnish writing on the train, and it looked like an alien language to him. He didn't understand the structure or how anything worked, so he was just fascinated by it. It felt like an alien language to him, so he was just fascinated by it. This would go on to be the inspiration for Quenya, And Sindarin, the other most prolific Elven language in his text, is inspired by Welsh. He would create 15 different Elvish dialects, as well as languages for Ents, Orcs, Dwarves, and Men. His fantasy worlds were created just to have a setting for these languages and to replace some of England's long-lost folktales. And to quote Tolkien, "I didn't invent Middle-earth, I rediscovered it." He started with the Silmarillion in the trenches, and I could go on and on about this man. I just find him, he's fascinating. And even more, he probably wouldn't want me giving this presentation about him. He's such a humble person, and I feel that's all the more reason why he's interesting. And the classic question you may have heard, if you could meet 5 people before you die, or if you could have one meal with 5 people, who would you? I would love to say Tolkien, but then I also realize, what would I say to him? I'm not going to impress him with anything. It would be like saying Einstein. Like, what are you going to say to that guy that you're really going to, excite him about? So, it's one of those I'd like to say Tolkien, but I kind of question if I really would want to meet him without him thinking I'm an idiot. I just came across this quote and I really loved it. I just wanted to highlight it, kind of Tolkien as a person. If you were, the BBC interviewer, if you were to be remembered as the man who has made Lord of the Rings, would you want to be remembered as a man who has said something or the man who has made something? I don't think you can distinguish the made thing unless it says something won't be remembered. Also wanted to highlight too, he was creating one of the most dense and amazing fantasy worlds, but on top of it, he was also doing some artwork, or did a lot of artwork, and granted, he's not the greatest artist, but he's just it makes me wonder when he slept, So in front of you, you do have the original Hobbit map on one side of your map there. This is where it kind of all started with this original Hobbit book. And this is Thorin's map. And I guess as a geographer, I work with digital maps all the time. And it's just cool. I think it's just cool to have a physical map that actually has magical properties. You can only see, it only lights up on the certain day, the moonlight, blah, blah, blah. I forget exactly all the details of that. But like I said, I just think it's cool, the idea of a physical map, maybe with, disappearing ink, or, like the idea that you actually need a physical map for something. I just find that intriguing or cool. But it's also easy to forget, and we kind of need to remember that maps are a piece of art. Someone did compose it and put it together and draw it, or at least draw it or put it together digitally nowadays. This is Weta's Hobbit movie for map that they did for the movie, just slightly updated. A few things, it just looks a little cleaner. Thought I'd throw that out there and point it out. But Tolkien was not a map maker. Tolkien was very humble about his ability to create on his own. His Hobbit maps leaned more towards art than cartographic genius. He told his publishers that he had small skill in preparing such things, and the maps on the previous pages are the maps used, but he ended up submitting 5 of them. Tolkien was inspired by maps made from the stories of William Morris, and people also speculate that he took map ideas from Gulliver's Travel and Treasure Island. So this William Morris story, there is a Silverfax horse and a King Gandalf. So he's obviously very inspired by these stories. I knew nothing about them before doing the research into this, so it's something I'm probably going to have to check out, or at least find out more about, but didn't have time before this presentation to dive into all of that. Also, in the bottom corner there's some, you can see kind of some of maybe the inspiration from Gulliver's Travels, which had been printed long before his works. So I wanted to highlight some of Tolkien's letters and his quotes about maps. In letter 141 in 1953, quote, The maps, I am stumped, indeed, in a panic. They are essential and urgent, but I just cannot get them done. I have spent an enormous amount of time on them without profitable result. Lack of skill combined with being harried, I feel the maps ought to be done properly. In letter 161 in 1955, the map is hell. I have not been as careful as I should in keeping track of distances. I think a large-scale map reveals all the chinks in the armor. May have to abandon it for this trip. In letter 141 in 1956, I wisely started with the map and made the story fit, and that it would have been impossibly confusing to try to figure out the journeys first. Now, I want to put a little disclaimer. Some people hate this quote because it kind of implies that you should have a map before you're even writing, but Tolkien was obviously writing before he was creating the map. So, but arguably, it shows that it is important, that it's good to, in the beginnings of your work, to keep in mind the actual distances and maps and what you're doing. Because one thing in fantasy worlds, as I told you, there's two camps. Either you give in or you don't. And you don't want to give people a reason to doubt you in your fantasy world. You know, if they're questioning distances, they're not thinking about the story as opposed, you need to absolve them into everything. And if they're questioning other things, they're not thinking about your story. But a quote here from Bilbo is that, I do love maps. I have quite a collection of them. And point out, too, that Bilbo Baggins, after writing The Hobbit, Tolkien always, whenever asked who is the character that's most like him, he always said Bilbo. But then after writing Lord of the Rings, his answer was Faramir. Point out here, too, that this is one of the first graph maps that he made. Supposedly he would even tape pieces over certain parts to get it right, but this is to help him with the scale and keeping distances correct. So this would have been the original fold-out map that you would have gotten in your 1954, I hope that's right, 54 copy of Lord of the Rings. And it is the first thing that you see when you would have opened your book. And point out, too, that in the movies, it is shown within the first few minutes, highlighting how important a sense of maps and that this world exists, how important that is. He basically also, obviously they took the structure of some of the Hobbit maps and basically just expanded this. Wanted to highlight too that take note of the signature. I guess it's hard to see here, but there's actually a different signature other than JRRT over there. And the reason for that is he had help a second time. CJRT, Christopher John Rule Tolkien, his son. So this is actually a sketch of one of Tolkien's first Silmarillion maps. As you can see, pretty basic beginning start. As you can see, you got to start somewhere with the map, though, right? Here is another map that you would have gotten in Lord of the Rings that they had created as the Shire map, as well as making the contour map between Gondor and Mordor, essentially the edge of good and evil, right? And Christopher John Rule Tolkien was considered an accredited student of Hobbit lore, as Tolkien would say. He was a member of the British Royal Air Force in South Africa and a chief cartographer of Middle-earth. His hand-drawn maps should be appreciated. Highlight that there's, the smoke above Mount Doom, the little tufts of grass that we have for the marshes, how the Old South Road slowly wears away. And a little text to give intrigue, like here was the old realm of the Witch King of Angmar, and little things like that. Christopher would go on to admit that there were errors in the original, but that have been updated since, such as the double label for South Gondor, You got South Gondor and so labeling South Gondor and Horondor, the forward ways and northern ways, they basically mean the same thing, but as he told, Christopher was not the linguist that Tolkien, that his father was. J.R.R. would also go on to point out later that the Shire map slightly misplaced Buckleberry Ferry and Brandy Hall. Tolkien would often lament about not having his son nearby to help, often wishing he was gardening instead. In letter 67, J.R.R. stated, "I wish I had you here, doing something useful and pleasant, completing the maps and typing." The maps came down to the wire, and in letter 187, he said, "I had to devote many days, the last 3 virtually without food or bed, to drawing, rescaling, and adjusting a large map," at which Christopher then worked for 24 hours, 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. without bed, in redrawing them just in time. So, if you thought I was mean about the movies, I'm going to let you know what Christopher has to say. They eviscerated the book by making it an action movie for young people, 15 to 25, Christopher says regretfully. Tolkien has become a monster, devoured by his own popularity and absorbed by the absurdity of our time. Christopher Tolkien observes sadly, the chasm between beauty and the seriousness of the work and what it has become has gone too far for me. Such commercialization has reduced the aesthetic and philosophical impact of this creation to nothing. There is only one solution for me, turning my head away. So, as you can see, I was the target audience, the 15 to 25. So, like I said, I have mixed feelings about that statement, so take that for what it's worth. But now I'm going to get into the history of the world of Middle-earth. So, one thing I want you to keep in mind, don't worry if you get lost. The lore is dense. I am only covering the most important events and the geographic changes. So don't worry about it. Like I said, this is something that you need to go over multiple times in order to start understanding, and if I get something wrong, my apologies. So essentially you have Eru Iluvatar, the god of this world, and he wanted to prepare the world for his children, the coming of elves and men. So they sing. He creates the Ainur to help him. The Eru, the Valar, and the Maiar sing the world into existence. And now let me pose a question to you. Scientists say that our sun makes a humming or a thrumming noise. So if that's the case, does our sun sing to us? But then after that, you have the discord of Melkor, the most powerful of the Valar, basically singing his own tune and chord that some would latch onto and start singing themselves. So essentially, you have God, archangels, angels, and Satan from Christianity. Before Arda formed, you have Melkor, and he claimed it for himself. Manwë, his brother, the Zeus figure, or arguably the Zeus figure, there's a lot of parallel. It's basically a melding of Christianity and some Greek mythology as well. But Manwë tells him no, that's a bad Melkor. Then comes the first war and the marring of Arda. Melkor flees Tolkis and his laughter into the walls of night, searching for the flame imperishable. It is what he covets. Tolkis is essentially being created by Eru to be the fighter. He can wrestle anybody. And so like I said, he's the figure of fear for anybody who's evil. Evil cannot create life in this world. It can only be given by Eru. So orcs are actually elves that have been twisted. Point out, everybody loves this quote, right? I am the servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anur. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you. Flame of Adun, go back to the shadow. You cannot pass. And point out that because this is Adun. This is the Iron Mountains here. This is actually from the Atlas of Middle-earth by Karen Fonstad, and I'll talk about her stuff later. The world originally was flat and lit by the 2 lanterns made by Aule. Originally, there was peace in the Isle of Almarin. Basically, everyone was kind of living on this peaceful island in Eden, if you will. And Melkor would come out of hiding from the doors of night and raise up Atunmo, or Adun, the original place of evil, or the Iron Mountains. The land is slowly poisoned, and the symmetry of the world and the era ends with the destruction of the lamps by Melkor. The world is split into Middle-earth and Aman. The Valar raise the Pelori and giant, so we have the Middle-earth and then Aman. They raise the Pelori for the defense against Melkor and go that way. And I hope you like Middle-earth art, because I got a lot sprinkled in here. I love Middle-earth art, so I appreciate it. And I wanted to highlight the importance of art within fantasy. I mean, questionably, I'd argue might be the last place left for painting and art. I mean, nowadays, back in the day, right, if you wanted a landscape, it would actually make more sense to get it painted because it would look better. Our photography has come such a long way that I'm just saying that photography has kind of replaced painting in a certain way or a certain realm. But you still, in the world of fantasy, you still have to pull what's in someone's brain and put it onto a page. That's always going to need an artist, and that's always going to need someone to do that work. I also want to point out and highlight again that maps are art, and that we may not think, I would argue it's similar to the vein of special effects artists in Hollywood, right? That they are artists, but maybe we don't think of them as such. We kind of think of them as computer workers, right? And people plugging away at stuff. But realistically, what they end with is a piece of art. So afterwards, we have the years of the trees. Yavanna creates the 2 trees of the Valinor. Varda lights the stars. She's one of the main deities. The elves awaken, and this marks the first age. Melkor meets the elves first and causes distrust of the Valar. And Melkor is defeated and imprisoned by Tolkien, but then eventually pardoned and released. So they give him a second chance. We have a great elf named Feanor. He creates the Silmarils, maybe some of the most beautiful jewels and artifacts that have been created by beings of this earth to date. Melkor convinces Ungoliant, Shelob's parent, to destroy the 2 trees while they're all having a party. Basically, this happens right after he gets let out, so they, shows he hasn't learned anything. Melkor kills Finwë, the leader of the elves, steals the Silmarils, and flees to Middle-earth. Alas, silver flower and golden fruit are taken from the trees and given to the Valar to create the sun and the moon. So afterwards, it is the years of the sun, but it is still the first age. And we got Morgoth is also the name translates as the dark enemy of the world, and Ungoliant, the dark spider, are also known as Gloomweaver. So this would have been the copy that you would have gotten with your map copy that you would have gotten with the Silmarillion, highlighting the land of Beleriand, where a lot of the events of the Silmarillion takes place. This is also from the Atlas of Middle-earth, but just to kind of give you a better idea of what the world looks like at this time. But it is still flat. So we've got then afterwards, we're still in the years of the sun, but we're in the first age. Melkor is named Morgoth by the elves, and his actions cause the Oath of Feanor. Feanor is that all of his sons come together and say that they will stop at nothing to get the Silmarils back. Stop at nothing. This leads to the first kinslaying of the Telari elves because they need their ships to cross the sea in order to get to Morgoth. The Telari elves deny them this, so they start killing the Telari. Like I said, their oath is to deny them nothing, and this is the first time elves have ever killed elves before in this world. So this ultimately leads to the doom of Mandos, essentially occurs from the gods as the ships are crossing the sea. They're basically given the Well, if you keep going, you will be cursed, so causing some of them to turn back, but most of them continuing on to continue with their quest. Feanor burns the ships when he reaches Middle-earth, and at the time the world is flat, so the world witnesses this giant burn. Even though it is across the sea, they're still able to see all of the flames and all of the destruction from the burning of the ships. Then afterwards, you have the crossing of the Helcaraxe by some notable elves. Afterwards, we're still in the first years of the sun, or the years of the sun, the first age. We have the awakening of men, the war of the jewels or the Silmarils, the creation of dragons, and Glaurung enters the Dagger Bragaloth, or the Battle of Sudden Flame, where it is a lot of people end up dying, or a lot of elves end up perishing in that battle. You also have Fingolfin versus Morgoth in single combat. And me personally, it's one of my personal favorite stories of the old, non-Lord of the Rings, non-Hobbits. One thing that is a continuing theme through Tolkien's work is the idea that even if you are facing insurmountable odds, it is noble to face your death. It is noble to like I said, I'd recommend, I don't want to give away too much, but it's one of those, if you don't know much about it, it's one of my favorites. So, but then also you have the story of Beren and Luthien. If you don't know, Tolkien and his wife have Beren and Luthien inscribed on their tombs. It's kind of it's one of those, if you're going to write a story for your wife, I guess you better make it a good one, right? Then afterwards, we're still in the years of the sun, the first age. The second and the third kinslaying happens once again over the Oath of Feanor. It keeps happening over this. We will dedicate ourselves to anything in order to achieve this goal. Then you have the fall of Gondolin, the secret city, the creation of the winged dragons, and Morgoth's defeat and the destruction and the flooding of Beleriand. So, like I said, love some Middle-earth artwork. So this is the War of Wrath. Just thought that was awesome. Then this is what you have in front of you, kind of what the world, you've got Middle-earth here and then Beleriand connected. So you kind of have a sense of where the entirety of this world is before Beleriand collapses into the sea. Also wanted to throw this one in here. It gives you a little more Nat Geo geography, kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. So, also appreciated this 3D kind of image. The world is, like I said, still flat at this time, so I just thought that was kind of cool to look at. Wanted to highlight the island of Numenor here. This is a map of that, and we'll go into a little more detail about that in a bit here. So then after that, we lead ourselves into the second age. As you can see, this is kind of highlighting where these lands have sunken into the sea. Elros leads the Edain to Numenor. Then Sauron disguises himself as Annatar and helps the elves forge the lesser rings. The One Ring is then forged in secret, and Sauron pronounces himself. Rivendell is founded, and Sauron is driven back to Mordor, as well as the Tower of Barad-dûr being completed. In the Second Age still, we have Ar-Pharazôn invading Middle-earth, King Ar-Pharazôn, who's the king of Numenor, coming to invade Middle-earth. Sauron surrenders because he knows he really can't fight him off. Sauron basically pulls a Jafar and just whispers into his ears these ideas of immortality. One thing you have to understand is that the men of Numenor, they live longer lives than men, sometimes between 300 to 500 years old. And which is why Aragorn has such a life, because he's a descendant of Numenor. But you have to understand, humans are jealous of elves for their immortality in this world. And so Sauron kind of gives them the idea that they can take immortality. So he gets them to set off on their ships and sail for Valinor. This causes Eru to basically sink Numenor into the sea, equivalent to the story of Atlantis, right? This cataclysm, also in the destruction of Numenor, Eru makes the world round. The faithful flee to Middle-earth, so a few ships of the Numenorians that are faithful not to the this new like kind of evil cult that Sauron has created. They flee to Middle-earth. And then Valinor remove Arda from the actual physical world. So now you can no longer actually sail to Arda. There's kind of like that weird, you need the right ship at the right time. There's like kind of magical ideas behind it. So this here, this is the newer, updated kind of map of Middle-earth. That without the Balerian attachment there. Then we go into the Third Age. A lot of you will be a little bit more familiar with some of the events here. We have the Hobbit, and when the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings take place. We have the Gladden Fields where Isildur is slain, and the Angmar War, the founding of the Shire, the Battle of the Five Armies, the War of the Ring, the final defeat of Sauron, the destruction of the One Ring, the scouring of the Shire, and the elves departing from Middle-earth. And as you can see, there really hasn't, other than Numenor sinking into the sea, as you can see, there's like a little tiny itty-bitty island that's, the tip of the mountain got left there, but for the most part, it all got sunk into the sea. Now, I just want to share this with you because this is one I know everybody loves the movie interpretation of the Balrog, but I came across this artwork and I thought it was a little bit more faithful to the books, and I just thought it was pretty awesome. So I thought I'd share that with you. So some of the criticisms of Tolkien's maps is that questioning all these right-angled mountains. There's not a whole lot of places on Earth where that kind of happens, so he's kind of got it all over the place, and that's a criticism some people have. This river runs parallel along to this mountain range for a very long time, which is kind of an oddity, but also that there's a river delta here that flows into another river, so that kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So but overall, when you consider the scale and scope of what he was doing, I feel like you kind of have to give him some leeway. But also a fun fact, most scientists did not believe or accept the theory of plate tectonics until after The Lord of the Rings was published. This world does have supernatural forces capable of changing the landscape, so I think it's a good idea to keep that in mind. Also wanted to share with you one of my favorite Tolkien quotes. So I guess when people would come up, he would frequent bars in England, and people would come up to him and ask him, well, why didn't the Eagles just take Frodo to Mordor? And his answer would be, shut up. Just shut up. Realizing that there's some humor that, you have to, in order to write a story, you need, take it for what it's worth. These are fantastical stories. They're, it's a fantastical world. Like, just shut up. But also, me personally, one of my biggest criticisms is naming Sauron and Saruman. Why? It just feels like it's a cruel thing to do to your audience. I know he's a linguist, and it probably makes sense to him, but just give them a different name. Just, it's one of them a different name. While unlikely, there are real world examples, and I will come across them in some of the future slides here. Also want to share this with you. I came across this. Some people have done some overlays of what Middle-earth would look like on our world. As you can see, this one's with the shadow of Europe and then versa versa. But just to kind of give you some scale of about where it is, and it kind of makes sense. Like this, this is England, right, where the Shire is, and Minas Tirith is where Italy is, or about where Italy is, and so it actually all kind of lines up pretty nicely or pretty well. But also, right, this is America. You need some scale, right? So give you a little idea of maybe what Middle Earth would kind of look like if you were traveling, or if you're traveling as Bilbo to Erebor, what you're going from South Dakota to Idaho, right? Yeah. So be about the equivalent if you wanted to make that journey or walk. So point out or highlight some real world places that have inspired Middle Earth. I mean, obviously there's New Zealand. I mean, that didn't inspire Middle Earth, but it is incredible that you can see all of these landscapes that were used for the movies on one or two islands. Pretty incredible. But me personally, I would recommend some other places. There's the Lake District in England, which is the inspiration for the Shire. As you can see, absolutely gorgeous. Brill, England is the inspiration for Bree. The Cheddar Gorge Caverns in Somerset, England is the inspiration for Rohan and the Glittering Caves in Helm's Deep. Look at that road. Oh man, driving on that. Then the Forest Dean of Gloucestershire, which I hope I'm saying that right, is the inspiration for Fangorn Forest and is on the border of Wales and England. Also found out that there are some mines underneath that I guess Tolkien would travel through, and they're the inspiration for some of the dwarven mines that he would write about. You also have Perrot's Folly and Edgbaston Waterworks Tower in the Ladywood district of Birmingham, England. I guess Tolkien would walk by these two towers every day to school for a while, and arguably were the inspiration for his two towers, the idea of two evil places. We also have Colmer's Hill in England, arguably the inspiration for Weathertop. And if you think that photo is beautiful, imagine waking up in the morning and seeing that. Gorgeous. Then you also have Ravenna and San Marino, Italy, Minas Tirith. I guess this is actually San Marino. Ravenna is the inspiration for Minas Tirith, but as you can see, it's pretty close, and I just found this landscape kind of more reminiscent of what Minas Tirith is. This is actually Ravenna over here. But yeah, I guess those are the inspirations for where Tolkien drew for Minas Tirith. I also came across this, just thought it was gorgeous, this Mont St. Michael Francis. I don't know if it's any inspiration for it, but obviously it gives the Minas Tirith built into a cliff kind of vibe to it. And I don't know if this is photo edited, but wow. But then you have Lauterbrunnen in Switzerland, the inspiration for Rivendell, also known as the Valley of 72 Waterfalls, which I guess one of them being there's a hidden passageway behind one of the waterfalls, and that may have been the inspiration for the entrance to the secret city of Gondolin. You also have the Alps, which are the inspiration for the Misty Mountains. Mount Fuji is the closest real-world example that we would have to the Lonely Mountain. Also, I don't recommend going there, but in Australia, they have a Mordor pound, which, as you can see, it has that odd square mountain structure around it that most of the world doesn't have. But I guess the people who went there found it eerily similar to the description of Mordor, so they gave it the name. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is probably the closest thing you're going to get to Mount Doom. And one of my personal, I hope to get there one day. Meghalaya, in just north of India, or in the northern part of India. the living root bridges. These people have lived there for 800 years, and they pass this tradition on to their children, that they weave these roots together in order to make these giant root bridge, even having double deckers. I just imagine that this is what the elves would do, right? So, awesome. Just hope I can get there one day. So I heard that the internet is down. I had a 4-minute clip here. I heard it's down, so I don't know if we'll, I don't think it'll work here. But wanted to point out too that online there's a ton of, I was actually genuinely surprised how much was available. There's tons of interactive maps showing you their journeys. Anything you want to know. It is shocking the amount of people, the resources that are dedicated to this love of this fantasy world that people have. So I'd recommend any one of those. They're all doing great stuff. Also, if you don't want to make maps of your own, you can always just buy it, right? There's websites, Lord of Maps, that make for states, for the world, I'm sure you could call them up and get whatever you wanted.
Could I get a screen grab of that last slide? Or no?
We'll talk at the end.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, just remind me and I'll gladly get whatever you need. Like I said, even having a full book, over 75 hand-drawn maps that he's put together, it's on Amazon, and it was a little pricey, but also, tons of merchandise and tons of crap, to everything, whether for better or for worse. One I thought was most ridiculous is, who needs an Aragorn rubber ducky? A little extreme, but it's out there if you love it, we're at the point where there's tons of video games on Lord of the Rings, of varying quality. Also wanted to highlight too, about a year-ish ago, they put out a Magic the Gathering set. I hadn't played for years, or since high school. I originally got into it because there were orcs and goblins and elves and stuff, and that's why I started playing it. So it was nice to actually get back into it. And I think some faults, but overall they did a great job with the flavor and the text and everything. And maybe you heard about in the news, this Post Malone guy. I'm not a fan of his music at all, but the guy spent over $2 million on one Magic card that was the Willy Wonka golden ticket, the one ring that they made with. So, whatever. Also highlight that they did a whole set of, in Magic, there's lands that you have to use, they're basic lands, but they did a whole set that basically does the whole Middle Earth map broken into pieces for the basic lands, which is very cool. I am a fan of those. Highlight some of my resources here. The Atlas of Middle Earth by Karen Fonstad is absolutely amazing. I could not recommend it enough. I would actually genuinely even recommend it before the Silmarillion, because it's easier to digest. It's more, I'm a visual learner though, so I guess it depends on the way you feel about things, but but in doing some research, I actually found out that she was the director of cartographic services at UW Oshkosh in Wisconsin, and she was on the Oshkosh City Planning Commission, both of them for over 20 years. So thought that was very cool. She unfortunately passed away in 2005 of cancer, so she died unfortunately pretty young, but I was able to conduct an interview with her husband, and she worked diligently on this into the late nights, and loved what she did. But the thing also about it is, it's interesting looking up that I've never come across a book that's not considered canon, but is referenced so much. Like, it's not, like I said, it's not officially part of the Tolkien lore, but man, people like to point to this and be like, yeah, well, this is what this atlas says. So it's interesting in that regard. It's been translated into at least 6 languages, if not more. Todd needs to get back to me completely on the total count on that. But she had created a guidebook for the Atlas of other fantasy worlds as well. The Atlas of Pern, which is the Dragon Riders of Pern series, I know nothing about. The Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, which is the Atlas of the Land, and she also did 2 books for the Dragon and Dungeons series and Dragonlance, the Atlas of Dragonlance World, and the Forgotten Realms Atlas. So very prolific in the fantasy world. It's kind of shocking to see how prolific she was. Show you the covers here. She was also, Todd also told me that she was this close to getting a deal with the Chronicles of Narnia, but it ended up falling through. So, unfortunate. But threw a couple of her maps on here this was before digital mapping. This is all hand drawn. Just take a second. And her book, these are a few of the maps from her book. It's just absolutely stunning, the detail that she went into, it's mind-boggling. Like I said, it's work to be appreciated. As someone who's a geographer, and granted, like I said, I work with digital mostly now, but I understand the kind of work that needed to go into this, and it is shocking that someone put this much work into it. So, I unfortunately we don't have she does have I came across this recently. There's a special feature on this DVD that she has a little segment on that she talks about as the languages and landscapes of Middle Earth. Where so in case you're trying to see more of what she actually looks like or is as a person. But then we also have some of the resources, other resources that I did. A lot of it was mostly YouTube. There's a guy named Mapster. I think the googly eyes are hilarious. There's Nerd of the Rings, Men of the West, Invitica, Jess of the Shire. She's absolutely great. But the Nerd of the Rings I recommend at the absolute most. It's probably what got me into this. I'm a visual learner, and he does everything. I mean, he's got a video on the swords of Middle Earth, the elves, any topic. He's still putting out videos, and I've been watching him since COVID. He's been making it a lot more digestible, as well as giving artwork to some of the people. One of the biggest problems I had with the Silmarillion is you feel like you need to build a chart of who's who, and but I feel like he talks about people and then there's artwork there. It's easier to get that visual, I have a link to, I remember what that guy, there's that art I remember of that guy, or, it's just to give you a little more context. So, all these are great, but the Nerd of the Rings, if you want more detail just about any subject in Middle Earth, he does great work. I just wanted to really highlight that. I also did watch a few BBC interviews of Tolkien, and those are great. He only did 1 or 2 in his lifetime. He was a relatively reclusive guy and didn't give a whole lot of public interactions. So the few that he did are somewhat special. Wanted to point out the reasons why Lord of the Rings still goes on. It's just the lasting appeal. Tolkien hated allegory and preferred applicability. And the genius in this is that instead of the writer beating something over the reader's head, it allows the reader to take what they want from it. And I think that's why it continues to last as appealing format, continues to be appealing. Also, the themes are timeless, right? Love, hope, friendship, power, sacrifice. These are still relevant today. The world that he created was built with love and care, no concern for money. That he was genuinely shocked that this many people were interested in what he was doing and creating. Also, too, that he had alternative motives with the language and the English history. That you can create a fantasy world, but he had reasons that he was doing it. That you can read Lord of the Rings, but it's also, if you have an understanding of linguistics, there are things that you're going to pick up and appreciate more than someone else. Also, that while we read the books, he references other things, and it feels like, there's other places that he's gonna go, and that there's more, that there's more to be discovered as you're reading this, that Aragorn is the descendant of Numenor, and you're reading Lord of the Rings, like, well, what the hell is Numenor? You know what I mean? So I think it just scratches that itch for people who want to know more, and that he created such a big and dense and powerful fantasy world. I highly recommend Fantasy Worlds. It is a piece that Tolkien wrote, and it kind of gives you an underlying understanding of Tolkien's appreciation for fantasy, why he does what he does. It just, after reading it, I feel like I have a better understanding of what Tolkien wants his audience to go for, or to appreciate, or to like. I once again, I highly recommend it. It's one of those, maybe it might be under the radar for some people, but it's definitely worth your time. And if you can't get enough of it, you can get a degree in Tolkien studies at multiple schools. I guess there's, but also at the end too, I wanted to point out I had some other ideas for some presentations. I've gotten big into Attack on Titan, and I don't know if I'd have enough material for it, but also The Legend of Zelda, big Zelda fan. So if you have any feedback on that, please let me know. I'm just kind of mulling the idea of, should I put a lot of work into this, so should I put more work into that? So the feedback is appreciated if you do think any of those things. Cool Zelda maps, right? Also wanted to dedicate this to the memory of my friend Ben Kollick. Quote from him from his funeral: "Don't sweat the small stuff. Spread happiness and love every chance you get, even if it's smiling at a stranger or doing something to make someone else's day a little better. Just do it. Follow your heart and do all the things you love. Whether the people think it's nerdy or weird or different, do it. It's what makes life worth living and can make open opportunities for you and make a difference in the world." Favorite quote of mine and his was always all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. The end. But I didn't think it would end this way. End? No. The journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path, one that we all must take. The gray rain curtain of this world rolls back and all turns to silver glass. And you see it. What, Gandalf? See what? White shores and beyond, a far green country under a swift sunrise. Well, that isn't so bad. No, it isn't. Any questions or thoughts or yeah, I mean, if you're going to be brutal, wait till the end and come to me in person. So that would be appreciated.
Sure. So as a geographer, you make maps, I suspect. Are there any good plugins for QGIS or ArcGIS that has that look of Tolkien maps?
Okay, so that video I was going to show actually is, well, I don't know QGIS, but actually it talks about it. It's literally the style of. Did internet still not? Okay. But it's literally is just Esri. Are you aware of their? Yeah. So it's their, a guy who has a style called One Ring to Rule Them All style, and it's he's actually coming to present at our WLA conference in February, and I'm very much so looking forward to meeting him. So yeah, he's prolific. He's got some videos out there that are just. He's got a whole series on how to make maps through Esri with the map, with the Esri program and his style. So there is stuff. I like I said, I'm just not aware if QGIS has something, and my guess is probably.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if there's like a good one that you would recommend. But
yeah, like I said, I'm because I'm doing government work, I have access to Esri, so I get the good stuff. So yeah, QGIS is if you're unaware, QGIS is geography. But it's free. to anyone. You know, it's online and available, so it's free for anybody to use, but that also comes with its caveats. So, any other questions, thoughts, or? And I'm sorry about that World War II thing. So thank you for pointing that out. That's highly embarrassing, but I'd rather be right.
In the first dozen or so overheads, where you explain philosophy, history of actual people, their thoughts, you know, before you lead into the make-believe world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, quotes from famous authors, the life of Tolkien, things like that. Is there a way to get a copy of your overheads for the first?
So on the flyer there's my email. If you want to get that from me, I can definitely, so I'm hoping, I'm doing this, and then I'm also going to be recording at River Falls. The better one's going to be getting put up on YouTube. But if you are interested, I can send you a PDF of my presentation here.
Oh, okay.
If that's what you would like.
That'd be great.
Yeah. I'm, like I said, it's not going to be the present, the PowerPoint of it, but it would be a PDF of, so you can at least look over it. I'm willing to share that with people. So, like I said, if you look at a flyer somewhere, just grab my email. Unfortunately, I don't have any cards with me, but if you grab my email from one of the flyers, and send me something that.
Do you have your email on that flyer?
It's like I said,
I copied it.
Yeah. If my information is there, and if you contact me there, I will send you what you're looking for.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, glad you're interested. So.
You said you were gonna be doing this same talk at River Falls as well?
Yes.
Oh.
On Monday at noon in the River Falls Theater.
Oh, this Monday, okay.
Yep. So, and by the way, I forgot to mention, it is not Hobbit Day today. That's actually tomorrow. The library's just closed on Sunday, so I'm doing it today, and then I'm doing the one at River Falls. So just wanted to be clear, tomorrow is Hobbit Day, so celebrate and do a little something tomorrow to make sure you celebrate that. But just wanted to be clear that tomorrow is actually Hobbit Day, so I just didn't want any confusion out there. And I should have started with that, but hey, got a lot on my mind. So.
I don't know if this is a full road share, but I'm gonna go ahead. So I was looking for a gift earlier this year. I went to Barnes & Noble, maybe spring-ish, and I found a copy of The Hobbit, and it is leather bound with like the really thin, like almost like Bible paper pages, and the gold around the outside.
The foil. Yeah.
And I bought that as the gift, but then couldn't part with it, so it was really a different gift.
I can't blame you for that one. That's understandable.
No, it might still be available at that point.
Yeah. That's a good story. So yeah, no, I understand. I can relate. Let's just say you get something in the intent of giving it to someone else, and then you're like, oh, this is pretty good, isn't it? So yeah, no worries. So
Just in your list of references, there's another Middle Earth for Dummies actually.
Okay.
That has a book that's very helpful
Okay.
to just pulling things together.
sure.
That people might be interested in.
Absolutely. I want to write that down. That's what Middle Earth for Dummies.
Yep.
Okay.
It's one of the Dummies books.
Oh really?
You know?
Oh really?
And
It's
about
like one of those
Middle Earth,
yellow
and so
cover.
all of this history reading the Silmarillion, so difficult.
Yeah.
But
It's a hard read.
you now you have something that is more like a reference book
Right.
that can help you like pull it
Right.
together.
Well, and I'm sure that's great, but like I said, even depending on what kind of learner you are, for me, like I said, just that Nerd of the Rings was so helpful in that there was artwork that, like, it just, there's so many, it's like Game of Thrones, right? There's just so many people, you gotta watch it a couple of times before you're like, who's that guy? And who's, like, there's just too many people, and, if you
That's what helped me with just having the list. So like
Yeah.
your classic Sauron versus Saruman, you got something that you can go back, oh,
Yep.
yeah, I'm not getting that.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And it's comically too big. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? So it's, anybody who wants to be judgmental on them, like, whatever, you know, like, so, but yeah, anybody else?
I was just gonna mention a book that I recently read. It has nothing to do with Lord of the Rings in particular, but it's called Tending the Heart of Virtue, How Classic Stories Awaken a Child's Moral Imagination.
Oh,
It's
cool.
mostly talking about how, one of the main things is how we used to, as cultures, share these old fairy tales and things like that, that often didn't necessarily just bludgeon you over the head with the blunt end of the moral or the, you know, the story.
Right.
But, you know, took you along on this journey of teaching you things like what you were talking about, the classic things like love and
Right, wrong,
sacrifice
right.
and
Yep.
good and evil and all that stuff. And it's a fascinating read. It's mostly geared towards, you know, teachers and parents
Yeah.
and things like that. But
Well-
it was a really interesting resource for people interested in studying how literature and the study of classic literature and fairy tales can have an impact on people's moral imagination as well.
I wholeheartedly agree, and actually, a video I came across was, I think, literally titled like Tolkien hated Disney, because like he hated the dumbing down of the stories. Or he didn't feel like we should dumb down stories for kids. You know what I mean? So, you know, take that for what it's worth. But yeah, like I said, I kind of agree with that. Of like, you know, we don't need to. I mean, maybe when they're real little, but like at, you know, even at a certain age, like we shouldn't be holding their hands. Like there's, I mean, if you listen I grew up with Greek mythology, and some of that's awful. You know what I mean? Like kids, I mean, arguably shouldn't be reading that kind of thing. So
Yeah, well, hasn't that been done for quite a long time? Aren't Grimm's fairy tales dumbed down? I mean, weren't there horror stories?
Yeah, they are
originally?
horror stories.
yeah. And so I think that comes down to what version are you reading, right? Because I guess I'm, yeah. I mean, well, there's Grimm's and Aesop's fables, right? And like those are. Yeah, I guess yeah. Maybe I don't know enough. You know what I mean? I guess I'd like to comment more, but you make a good point. Is that maybe those are things to consider, that those are arguably that too, but yeah, interesting.
I think what we consider fairy tales were more of an oral tradition, almost more in pubs and that kind of stuff, and were originally very much meant for adults
Sure.
and very adult.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.
So, I think over time somehow it became told for children, but I don't remember how that
Yeah,
transitioned.
I suppose and then they went into books and that was commercial, so they had to dumb it down or change it in order to make it saleable, yeah.
You know, I think they would have actually presented the brutal Grims to children in terms of, you know, this is the world and these are the repercussions.
Yeah.
The world is not a kind place.
No.
And that needs to be
Yeah.
learned or taught to the children.
Right. Yep.
It's not going to be a coddling
It's
place all
right.
your life.
It's not always puppies and rainbows and candy canes.
Right,
You know?
right.
Not always. I mean, yeah, there's
It's a
but
harsh
yeah.
reality, but it is
right.
reality.
Right. Absolutely. So, alrighty.
I don't know if anybody ever dumbed down Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, that's kind of a brutal one, isn't it? That's a good one. But yeah, well, thank you all very much for coming. We appreciate it. As you can see, there's some food left, so feel free to help yourself on the way out. And anything else?
No.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you bringing us
Yeah.
together in this very.
Yeah. Well, hey,
enjoyable.
you coming out is great, and I mean, the more people, it shows that there's interest, right? And it makes it easier for people, you know, these kinds of things to happen. So, and you know, I had a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't make it this weekend," and I'll send you the YouTube video. So we appreciate you getting your butts out and putting them in our chairs. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And